and Transformations begins right now. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Transformations with Rick and Carly. Straight talk about life, business, and spirituality. I'm the Rick part of it, and right next to me over here, to my, that way, to my left is Carly. Hey, Carly, how are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing great, too. We're having beautiful weather down here in Southern California. It's been gorgeous.
It has. It's been really, really beautiful. And I am super excited about the show today because I've been asked repeatedly to do a show on kids. And so I'm going to put out a special shout out to my friend Justin. So this is for you and for a bunch of other my clients that I'm working with that are going through challenges, whether it be divorce and they don't have their kids with them on a daily basis, and just so many wonderful tips and tools. And I'm really, really looking forward to it.
Sounds great. So, kids, you love them. They drive you nuts. They're kids.
They are. Going back to the 80s, I used to run a private preschool called Learning, Playing, and Growing Incorporated. And it was a fabulous experience. And I ran it as a new thought, new age, all organic food. They went to library for story hour. They went to museums. They had lots of art. And by the time they left me, they were reading and writing, and they were getting. So I prepared them for basically kindergarten, and it was a fabulous experience. And I had a beautiful staff. And so what I'd like to address in this particular show is some very valuable tools. And you and I have had various conversations. Obviously, you have kids.
I have kid.
Yeah, that's true. a beautiful daughter.
Have
so
one
you
daughter.
Have lots of experience with
one
this.
daughter, and then we have interns at work, and I've worked as an U.S. Navy Sea Cadet officer where we had kids. I've taught martial arts for a long time with not that many kids. They were more adolescents, more like 17, 18 and older. But kids.
It's fascinating to me. What I found very fascinating was my particular group of kids, and this isn't just, I see this time and time again, and you and I have had this discussion where my kids would get dropped off. These parents were mostly families where both parties were working, and a child would basically be dropped off anywhere from 6 to 7 o'clock in the morning, and they would be with me to 6 or 7 o'clock at night. So in essence, they were weekend children. These kids would basically get home, and their parents' main concern was feeding them, getting to bed, because they were exhausted. Their kids had to be in bed early to get up early, and these parents were commuting or going to work, and it's just very, very stressful for kids to be someplace for that long a time and not have quality care, not be being plopped in front of the TV.
Right, it is stressful, and unfortunately, it's not a natural way to raise kids. Many times we're in a two-income household, and everybody's trying to make ends meet. And then, of course, there's the other issue that when we're not trying to make ends meet, we're overscheduling the kids to no end. So the kids have no downtime.
They have no life. I mean, they get out of school, they're at after-school activities, they come home, they have homework, you feed them, and they put them in bed. And then weekends come. Parents are trying to catch up on laundry, errands or whatever, and then they may have help, but still they're attempting to even catch up or have downtime for themselves. The last thing some parents want is kids nagging at them. So I would find it really fascinating. I'd get the kids back on Monday and they'd be a wreck. It would take me Monday and Tuesday to get them back on track in terms of organization, behavior, all those things. And then, so Wednesday through Friday would be beautiful. Come Monday, have all the behaviors all over again.
Right.
Tantrums, crankiness, because it's all that need for attention. And I've seen a lot with parents is it's like the barter. Well, if you do this, I'll give you a cookie. If you don't do this, I'll take this away.
Right.
And you and I have talked about different tactics in terms of not always work for all kids. One timeout for one kid, I would love for you to relay that story again, does not equate the same timeout for another kid. One person may hate it. Right. The other kid may love that timeout.
Yeah, we had one family friends, and they had twins, and one of the twins would get in trouble, and they would give him timeout. He's in heaven. He was alone. Nobody bothered him. He loved being in timeout. It was great. He got to read. He got to play on his computer. Timeout was the best thing on earth for him. The girl, on the other hand, when she got time out, it was hell, a living hell, because she was social. She wanted to be around people. So one of them, actually, it sort of worked. The other one, it reinforced him totally that this is cool. Bad behavior gets me some peace and quiet. So you got to know your kids. You got to know what they like and what they don't like, and eventually they'll respond to that in one way or another. But it is funny how timeout doesn't always work. And I remember when I was growing up, you got a spanking here and there. And they were mostly well-deserved for the most part. I can't think of any I got that I didn't probably deserve. And I wasn't damaged. I've survived a horrible spanking. And I got the belt taken to me a couple of times. No, I didn't feel abused. It was like, okay, no big deal. And you moved on. And we all did okay. It wasn't fun, but you usually didn't repeat that same behavior. Aversion training can work. It's rough, but it can work.
Well, I would come across for that whole principle is there's plenty of other ways to discipline children besides hitting them, because they've actually shown when little kids get smacked, they've actually smacked their parent back, because you're basically teaching, it depends on what age. And there's so many different philosophies. I don't necessarily agree with spankings. I think it's like, okay, you're telling your child don't hit and you're hitting them. So it's kind of like, for me, it's like, if you want a child's behavior to change, you need to, model that behavior and find other ways. And tying into what you just said a minute ago, different principles for different timeouts, that's when I'd love to bring in, I wrote a blog post about life can be like a box of crayons. And one fascinating way to see how your child is, their behaviors and what type of personalities they have, is how they color, how they play with crayons. Some kids will take the whole box of crayons and dump them on the floor. Other kids will take one crayon out at a time. Some will actually start categorizing their crayons when they dump them out, putting them in different piles of the different colors. Some will use all the colors. Some will be fixated on one color. And it'll tell you a lot about your child. And I know you were telling me a story earlier, so I'd like for you to share your experience of remembering how you used crayons.
Yeah, we were talking about that this morning right before the show, and when I had crayons, I remember I loved coloring. It was great. And my crayon box had one of those, I think, 64 Crayola ones with a little sharpener right in the middle of it, and it was fun. And I would take out one crayon at a time, color, put it back in, take out the next one. And I'm not the most organized person, but back in those days with crayons, it was one, put it back in, two, put it back in. And I varied my crayons. I used a lot of them. Sometimes I would organize them by colors. More often than not, it was really just use them as I needed them, but very carefully. And I tried to mix as many as possible. And one thing we didn't talk about before the show is, how do people color? Now, I used to color in the lines. It had to be perfect. I had to show that it was perfect and it looked good. Other people like to color all over the place. Lines don't really mean much. And so there's that characteristic as well. Where do you color? And do you color things the opposite of what they might be? So those are all things that I think give you a little bit of an insight onto what the kids like. My daughter was just throw it all down on the floor, crayons flying all over the place, and the coloring was somewhat neat, but the organization afterwards, then they go find the crayons. They were all lost afterwards. So it was a different style again. Very interesting. My wife was the one who organized crayons in their perfect thing, and all crayons had to be sharpened exactly the same way. So she was very kind of anal retentive about that. It had to be perfect. No, she wasn't creative though. Always within the lines, and never ever will those crayons be out of the correct placement.
And so again, if we look at our children, I know one of the graphics I gave you was, do we observe children playing? If you look at children playing, they'll actually be looking at the child next to them and will actually modulate or take whatever that child's doing and adapt it to what they're doing. They're always looking at each other very intently, and especially when you have an older sibling and a younger sibling, that younger sibling is actually learning through the older sibling, through just watching and listening. And so it's really fascinating. And again, those characteristics will play out in the rest of their life. The old, saying is how we do one thing in one area will play out in other areas of our life is very true. So people that are very methodical about their crayons and organize their crayons, they tend to be people that are more, like you said, perfectionist, more organized, more need a space that is controlled, versus the people that kind of throw the crayons out and use all sorts of massive color or coloring out of lines tend to be more risk takers. They tend to be more creative, and they tend to play more, as I say, out of the box.
Okay, Carly, fess up. How did you play with crayons?
I was both and in all truth. I loved very, very bright colors. I did like them. I didn't like them in the box. I liked them in a bin. They had to be in a bin, though. I didn't like them just thrown all over the place. I was organized. I was very massively about massive colors and, passionate. And I wasn't a perfectionist in terms of, they were in the lines, but it was weird. For me, it was more about, I would draw outside of the picture as well to add to the picture. So, yeah, I was just, full of the color.
Now, there's also kids who eat crayons. That's a whole other issue. But and if you give them barley, I think that helps that, but I'm not quite sure.
Okay, we're not going to go down that path.
Let's not go down that path. But I have known kids who actually eat their crayons and you just go, why are you eating a crayon? Tastes good.
Well, all kids go through that tactile thing where they need to feel in their mouth. It's all their senses awakening. Go back to psychology and other things that children eat. We go through all these phases of having textures and smells and flavors. And it's so part of that crayon eating is that whole experiencing with textures and flavors and all that. So another thing I really wanted to bring up, because it's so vitally important, and actually goes out to Justin and a few other people, was about energy in kids. It's really harmful for kids, sleep patterns, and actually it affects their hyperactivity to have a lot of electronics in their room. I always tell people, any kid that's under high school, you don't want to have electronics in their room, especially at nighttime. It really does affect their sleep rhythms. Computers, cell phones, TVs, they give off a field, they give off an energy, and that vibration, which is, the actual I know you all feel it. If you put your hands near a computer, you will actually feel that little energetic pull, and it does. It feels like something's vibrating.
Well, yeah, and computers can affect radio waves and other things. So, don't think for a moment that we're not somehow touched by all the devices around us, including, heavy lights. A lot of people said, oh, the kid's afraid of the dark, so let me put a light on for them while they sleep. Well, guess what? Now the kid's not sleeping because the light keeps them awake.
There's studies that show that if you wake up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom and you turn on the bathroom light, it activates something in your brain to think it's daytime.
Yeah.
A little night light is one thing, something that's a very soft light. However, turning on a light really does affect their biorhythms.
And so as a result, when they wake up at night, let's say they do go to the bathroom, they can't go back to sleep. Because if they do turn on the lights and everything, now they're awake. It changes the melatonin levels change in the body, and all of a sudden I am up.
The serotonin, it affects your melatonin and your serotonin, actually. It's really fascinating. So, and I always encourage people, create a space, if you can, outside of the room for even kids that are older, for computer time and for game time or TV time. And make sure it's TV that's not going to cause nightmares. Because here's the thing, they've also done studies with kids that fall asleep to TV have more nightmares. Because you got to remember, when we're watching TV or the news or, there's this death, that death, whether we know it or not, we're subliminally hearing those messages. And there have been studies on kids having more nightmares through falling asleep to the TV. I just don't think even a teenager needs to have a TV in their bedroom. No,
and I can vouch for that. I remember as a kid, I was probably about 5 or 6 years old. And I remember this vividly. It was an early evening, and we were watching The Wolfman with Lon Chaney. And I'm sitting there, all of a sudden, the Wolfman shows up. I was like, ah! Yeah. And that night, I remember not having a very good night's sleep. I actually remember that. I was about 5, maybe 6. And it was spooky, having this little hairy thing, and you would see the hand come right around the door. and this hairy hand, and you'd look and go, oh my gosh, there's a hairy hand there. Of course, it's shadows because it was dark, but, so kids are very, and we talked about this on a previous show. If you take your kid to a movie, don't, because a lot of these movies are not for kids. They do scare them. They're very loud. The effects are not really meant for children, probably under 10 or 12. They can actually cause some damage, not only emotional, but even physical sometimes. Remember, kids' hearing isn't totally developed. If you blast them like that, they're going to have issues. Why do that to the kid? And if you don't have a babysitter, don't go. It's really simple.
Another huge one, you just mentioned that, just reminded me of two things. One was taking kids to fireworks. People, especially infants, people are like, oh, we want our kid to sleep through anything. It's one thing getting a kid to sleep through music or having a vacuum when you're cleaning around the house, okay? And I actually encourage parents to play sound vibratory music when a kid sleeps. That does help them go to a deeper sleep and a safer sleep, if you will. Taking an infant to fireworks or, even animals in their ears and young children, I take them to a place where you're not going to hear the pop. You let them see the colors of the fireworks. That's awesome. And if you're far enough away, you can still see the fireworks. It just depends on where you go. Or put earplugs in their ears so they're just seeing the colors and not getting those loud sounds. It's so traumatic for some kids. You wonder why kids are screaming and crying. And that ties into another one. There's been, people take their kids to rock concerts.
Yeah, no, that's insane.
It is. And there's this, what we call social media memes, MEME, and someone was passing around this image of a child being held up in the middle of the air with headsets on that were supposed to protect the baby's ears, like really big headsets. The baby was wailing, okay? And it's being held up in the air, and it's at a rock concert with thousands of people. And this was going all around Facebook, like, ha, 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 ha. And I'm like, really? And it was funny, some of the comments, the mother's instincts popped out and go, that's child abuse. That's crazy. The baby's crying. We have to use common sense when it comes to our kids. Just because we want to go to a bar and watch a sports event, just because we want to go do different things is not appropriate for children.
Well, it's interesting because common sense is not always that available to a lot of people. And we don't do anything at home or in school to teach people how to be parents. If you have no role model to emulate for being a parent, you will emulate whatever you have, and it might be a very bad role model. So as a result, bad parenting is something that just continues and continues and continues, and it doesn't get better. When you have a bad role model, it just gets worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. So you're creating a whole line of bad. And, unfortunately, we are pattern machines. We do pattern after everything we see, hear, touch, feel. And we have to be real careful with that, because if you're patterning that kind of behavior and then you don't understand why the heck your child at 12 is a complete demon who can't stop moving, can't stop this, can't stop that. It just needs constant stimulation every moment of every day. Look back at how you raised that kid. Look back at what that kid was exposed to, the amount of music, the amount of entertainment, and you might go, wow, I didn't do that kid much of a service, did I? And the problem is the parents probably were the same way. So you've got now probably 2 or 3 generations who have grown up on TV, on rock concerts, on this, on that, going out to eat versus eating at home. And so you've got behaviors that are now starting to become patterned into a generation after generation after generation. And those behaviors are not helping kids at all. At all. In fact, they're probably harming them in more ways than you can imagine. Not every one of our kids has ADHD or has bipolar disorder or that. And if you talk to any school counselor, oh, they're all sick, They're not. Kids have energy. You got to learn how to channel that energy. Oh, but we've cut all the PE programs down and we don't give them any time to play. Well, yeah, that's true. And all kids must be with females at all times. Why? Why can't the women be or the girls be together and the boys be together every so often? Why does everybody have to be at all times together? The kids are just being inundated with a lot of stuff that isn't really normal behavior for kids. And then you wonder why we have the problems we have. It's pretty obvious if you just go back a little bit of what changed. Probably from the 60s on, it's the TV generation. And even worse, it's 70s, 80s, 90s. Now they're not only on TV. They are literally on TV. They've been weaned on TV. All right, end of rant.
So I want to touch on a few things that you mentioned. I'm now got to remember which ones I was in my head. I was thinking, okay, this one, and then you went on and on.
I can rant again if you'd like.
Okay, so a couple of things I want to bring up. One is, if you it's okay for kids to have TV time. Make sure it's quality TV time. National Geographics. Something that's educational and entertaining, and limit that TV time. Kids that are on computers nonstop is not really healthy. Now, I'm going to address something else, homeschooling. A lot of people are reverting to homeschooling. There are massively creative ways where one person can be home half the time and another parent working full time, and that is through collaboration, getting parents together where once a week, each, like if you have like a block, okay, and you got 5 families. One family takes all the kids one night. There's a date night for that person. It's also important for mom and dad to get time alone, date nights and what have you. It's also equally important for kids to have that downtime, that time to just be creative, play, be silly, and it's also good to do that as a family. I want to address some of the things, though, that are really, I don't want to forget because it's really important. The divorce population. Okay, we have a lot of kids that are obviously from divorce. And I work with several different clients right now that are going through some intense divorce situations. And a lot of people are always saying the words no to kids. There's so many other things you can say besides no. Redirecting them. Let's go do this. Why don't we do this today? So it's really look at not ingraining on our children, especially when they're little and they're touching things and they're in their tools, and it's like no, don't do that, no, and you're slapping their hands and all that. Just take the child and redirect them in another direction, or actually, and as you're redirecting and telling the words, why don't we go explore this? Give them areas that they can explore, and not always telling them no. And then also adding to that is the parents that see their kids and then leave their kids. It's really hard for kids when you're telling them that you miss them. Whether we know it or not, it brings up an energy, and they actually do. They feel guilty that you're saying you miss them. Kids want to please. They want both parents to know that, they love them. And when they're with one parent and not the other parent, and let's say they see that one parent only every other weekend or once a week, every time you're saying you miss them, it does. It makes them feel guilty that they're not with the other parent. So use different words. Tell, I love you. And also make sure the kid knows that you remember what they did. So next time you're on the phone conversation in between actual physical visits, say, it was so great to whatever it is that you were doing. It was so great to go to the park with you. It was so great to play with you. It was so great to sing with you. Create ways that you can create dynamics where you're not using the words miss you and no. Use positive, empowering words. I love you. I can't wait to, hug and kiss you next time. I can't wait to and get them involved, engaged on what to do together. What are some of the things that what are some of your favorite music? Maybe we'll have a time where we're just singing and dancing. What are your favorite books? And there are movies that you can watch together. Now, personally, I find cartoons for little kids very violent. Where you're having the cartoon, and it's kind of funny. We grew up on cartoons, the Roadrunner and all these cartoons, and a lot of them are actually quite violent. So find things, start early. Find things that aren't violent, that are fun, that are creative. And always use encouraging words. Reframe, take them to a different direction, and get away from this barrage of negativity.
Now, it's interesting. There were studies done in Sweden probably about a decade ago that said that the effects of divorce on children, young children, and older last through a lifetime. Mm-hmm. So taking it back a step, you have a kid. That's a responsibility. Yes, you can have that responsibility as a divorced parent. However, think twice before you get divorced. Mm-hmm. Unless your situation is really an abuse one or some other problem. A lot of people get divorced for just very, frankly, stupid reasons. Oh, I had an argument. Oh, really? Welcome to life. It's called life. It's called living. It's called being in a relationship. That takes time, effort, commitment, and work. If you think it doesn't take work, you shouldn't have gotten married in the first place. But if you do get married, don't have kids just because you think you want to have kids. They've done a lot of studies also that if you wait about 3 to 5 years before you have a kid, you're now more mature, you're more stable, and you're more ready to deal with the kid because kids are work. don't think for a moment kids are easy. Some of them are, very few, but if you have one of those easy ones, please send them over to us because we will enjoy them. My kid wasn't easy. She was difficult. My wife kept saying, I was easy growing up. How come my child is so difficult? I go, it's time for payback. You had it so easy. But the thing is, think twice about divorce, because divorce isn't just affecting you or your loved one, or at this moment, maybe not a loved one. It's affecting your children. They're not possessions. They are beings that were, in essence, sent to you, created by you, that have their own lives. But you got to give them a chance to have a good life. You don't have to. Sometimes the circumstances don't give you any other choice. But be smart before you reproduce. It'll help everyone out.
And also, if you are young, okay, and you are the situation where you did get married and you were pregnant and you had a child, look towards resources for collaborative type of, if you look at villages, or if you look at, I call it the village mentality, if you have a lot of people helping you raise a child, it's a lot easier than saying, okay, it's just my child and I'm going to raise it alone. Literally look for groups where there is that type of thing where they help each other out, give each other date nights. Get your family involved. If you have a family that you do not want your children around for whatever reason that may be, when I grew up, I grew up very differently. I adopted families. I would literally adopt moms and dads because I knew my situation wasn't, my parents were never around. They traveled a lot. Okay, so I was alone a lot. I was left with the help a lot. And so I would literally, my friends, I would adopt their parents as moms and dads. So find other communities, find other parents that think community-wise, and that will help really to take some of the stress load off of you, and it helps take the stress load off of them. I'm all about collaboration, and I really do believe it takes a village to raise children.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, Carly, but in the USA, for some odd reason, we have very nuclear families. We don't have that village mentality that much. And you go to other cultures, if you go to South America, Central America, you go to Africa, parts of Europe, because a lot of Europe is not, they're very cold. It's also, again, very nuclear. Russians, very, very warm people. So you look at different family structures and different cultures, and you kind of have built-in villages in some of those cultures because they're very family-oriented. You may have a child and you've got 5 aunts, 5 uncles, and they're all there. And they, like Carly said, they become like your parents or second parents. So you've got a very nurturing family. And you don't always get that in our culture. It's a little more difficult here, but it can be done.
Yeah, and again, there's tons of resources out there, and if you want to learn about attachment parenting or conscious parenting, there's so many resources now. Another thing I really want to bring up, because it is an epidemic, if you will, is if we have children, okay, it's our responsibility to feed our children healthy. And if the junk is in your house, they're going to eat it, and so are you. And then we wonder why we have kids that are hyperactive. Kids' systems, especially when they're little, when you're overloading them with soda and preservatives and processed foods, they've done studies. If you take, and that's why I ran my preschool with organic food. When parents, let's say it was kids' birthdays, I wouldn't allow them to bring in processed cakes and cookies because I didn't want to deal with 8 hyperactive children. So be smart. If you want your kids to be healthy and not be all hyper and all that, it's just common sense. It's knowledge. It's been known forever that dyes and preservatives and sugars do affect our children. So have healthy food in the house. We have all these obese children, and no one's taking responsibility for that. It's the parents' responsibility. Yes, when they go to school, they can act, and the schools now they've taken the vending machines out, so all this, there's not all the candy anymore. There's the vending machines.
Now, we didn't have that growing up, did you?
Actually, in the private schools, no, it was all cafeteria food. Although you could buy, pizza and stuff like that. However, the food tended to be on the healthier side. And again, that's a whole nother area of cafeteria food. It's a lot of carbs, and it's not as healthy as it could be.
It's
in terms
filling
of more
and
vegetables.
it's comfort food and filling.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So It's so I can't impress how important this is. Take the time to have healthy food in the house. If you don't have enough money, I know a lot of people say, well, I'm on a budget. You can get believe it or not, a lot of healthy food really, there's places where you can go. I mean, I know people, and I know some people will flinch at this, will actually go to the 99-cent store, and you can get organic chickpeas, and there's a lot of organic lettuce, and believe it or not, those chains now are carrying organic produce and different canned goods.
But there is something you need to be aware of, and this is the myth of organic. I have a friend who
I know.
He's on the board of the California Organic Farmers, and he said, yeah, we use different kinds of pesticides. However, we use so much more of that it equates to exactly what you would get from regular. So he said there's a myth to that. I mean, all food is organic. Let's not kid ourselves. It's called organic. It's food. It's not artificial. The thing is, the kinds of pesticides they use, because believe me, very little is grown without pesticides, even organic foods. They use different things, but like he said, the amount is so high that it doesn't make any difference.
Well, okay, let me go back to that. This goes back to knowing your source, because not all organic is not organic. Because I've done a lot of studies in organic, and I've actually been around people who have actually grown organic foods and organic co-ops and farms.
Sure.
So what Rick is saying is true. There are a lot of falsified organic people that just label their stuff organic.
Well, especially the big farms.
Yes. So my point is, you need to know, when I used to run my center, my Celestial Wellness and Fitness Studio in New Jersey, and I carried all organic product, non-processed, no sugar, gluten-free, and all these different things, I did my due diligence. I went and researched the companies. I researched how they grew. So yes, you have to do your research. And there are companies that are very hold true to their organic standards. And there are organic pesticides that they will use. And I don't like the word pesticides because there are different. Yes, organic. The terminology of organic, I think, has become a dangerous one, and has been one that's been overused. But there are products that you can use that aren't as toxic to your body and aren't toxins, if you will, that do disturb or repel pests to come to the plants. So bottom line, use common sense. You can go to a farmer's market. If you know your farmer, that's the greatest place to know your resources. Get to know your local farm market people. They're the most amazing people to tell you how they grow their product. And they may not be labeled organic, but they're natural. And they'll tell you, we don't use harmful pesticides, or we don't use this. So just use common sense. Get to know where your food is coming from. Doesn't have to be certified organic. I know organic food can be really expensive, and like Rick said, there are a lot of people that claim one thing and really aren't. Just common sense. Do your due diligence. Find out where you're getting your food from.
Yeah, and if you do give your kids some cookies, it's okay. Just don't give them a lot.
Exactly.
You can't live life without Oreos. Just isn't quite as much fun.
Well, me and Rick differ on that, because I would never give a kid an Oreo. I mean, there's so many healthy. You can make amazing oatmeal cookies at home with raisins in them and nuts in them. There's plenty of sweets you can give a child that are healthy sweets. If you take apples and cut them up and put almond butter on them with some cinnamon, it's really good. There's lots of, so I differ in Rick when it comes to that, because I've seen, from having run a preschool and, being around 8 kids every single day, sometimes 24 hours a day, and also having my own.
Well, see, we didn't get cookies in school. When I went to school, even we didn't have preschool. We had kindergarten back then. We didn't really get cookies. Occasionally, you might have gotten an ice cream or something at lunch, but it was rare, not that often. And they were really small portions. It wasn't like these huge, hey, here's your ice cream. Wow. That's the other thing now. Everybody's supersizing everything. So as a result, you're getting 4 or 5 times more than you really need. Maybe, a couple cookies is better than a whole bag of cookies. Things like that. I mean, everything in moderation's okay.
I agree. You have to, and kids do want sweets. And so that's why, like I said, I would give the kids sweets at the center.
Yeah.
And so I knew that I would make them. So I know what was in them.
Yeah.
And so the kids weren't running around like they had 2 cookies. They weren't running around. If I gave them 2 Oreos, they'd be running around like little maniacs.
Right.
If I gave them 2 healthy cookies, they weren't running around like maniacs, because it's a different type of sugar. Little people, little bodies can't process all that white sugar. Even as adults, if you get jacked up on candy over Easter, you feel it. It's your sugar levels go all over the place.
Sure.
So for me, I really am a proponent for giving kids healthy snacks and healthy sweets. There are healthy sweets.
Yeah, the only thing I can say is if you do eat a lot of sugar, you got to work out twice as much to get rid of it.
Yeah, we have a generation of kids that are pre-diabetes.
I know, they don't even work out. That's the problem. They're too busy being indoors. So you're not getting vitamin D. You're not getting everything you need. You need some extra vitamin B. All of that because it's sedentary lives for kids. That's not good.
And so by the time these kids get in high school, they have diabetes. And literally in middle school and in elementary school, kids are now have high cholesterol and pre-diabetes.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time they get to high school, so, we really need to allow children. I don't like when people schedule, piano lesson, football lesson. Yes, you want your kids to be active. Maybe find an activity that's running around or whatever. That's playtime. It's not, maybe they don't want to be in an organized sport. That's okay. Make sure they do get their playtime and their exercise through another way. It could be going bowling with the family. It could be running around outside. It could be you have a trampoline in the backyard. There's lots of ways for kids to get activity that isn't organized sports if they don't want to be in organized sports.
That's right. And the good part is, if your kids are on have all those diseases, they won't live that long, and therefore they won't be on the government rolls, and that makes the government happy. So, there's always a plus side to everything.
Oh, now Rick's being cynical.
Mm-hmm.
Rick.
Yes, it's true, though.
God, Rick. Okay, we're going to get comments about that statement.
That's
but anyways, just use common sense when you come to your kid. Make sure your kids acknowledge them, support them. They need to hear encouragement and positivity. You are the voice for how they're either going to be confident or not. You're going to be the voice if you're beating them down and telling them all these negative things, you're setting them up for basically having to be a perfectionist when they get older, or they're going to be they're going to have self-doubt, low self-confidence. You are creating your children's lives. Literally, you have them in your hands, and how you treat them, what you say to them, what you feed them, all those things play out for the rest of their lives.
They do. And by the way, there are no perfect families.
Oh, of course not.
I mean, you can see them on TV every so often, but even nowadays on TV, they're pretty disgusting families. There are no perfect families. So don't think that you're failing because you're not perfect. Because if you were perfect, you wouldn't be having any problems, and you wouldn't even be watching this show. But seriously, there's no such thing as perfection. We all have dysfunctional families. I'll never forget, I think we talked about this one, but there was this big cartoon I saw one time. It was called... it was a family convention. They had one room that said functional families. The place had one whole kid in it, one whole family member. And then they had the dysfunctional family salon, and it was overflowing with thousands and thousands of people. So that's probably about right. Most families are somewhat a little bit dysfunctional, and yet you make it happen.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I'm not talking about being perfect here. I'm talking about just thinking about those things. Mm-hmm. You do the best you can, obviously, and know that there are a lot of resources out there. So all I'm saying is, do the best that you can. Use the tools that you have. If you don't have enough resources or the tools, go seek those tools and resources. Take a parenting class.
Yeah.
There's some amazing parenting classes out there. There's a lot of tools and resources. Don't be ashamed. Now, that's a lot of problem is that we feel guilty or ashamed when we don't know something. If a client asks me a question and I don't know the answer, I will tell them, you know what? I'm not really sure about that, but guess what? I know someone that does, or I'll go investigate it, and then I'll give them the answer. Never be ashamed to go ask for help if you don't know something. There's the world of internet. There's a lot of resources that you can get that are out there, free. And there's a lot of free parenting classes, free libraries. So when people tell me, what I'm saying is, the excuse of not having money isn't an excuse anymore, because there's a lot of free resources to help teach you. And again, libraries are a great resource. And reaching out to, there's all sorts of centers and churches. And I'm not saying a church in terms of theology, but a lot of churches do have outreach programs that aren't theology-based, that are just outreach programs to help you with parenting or teach you or connect you with other groups. So do not be afraid to ask for help. If you need help, ask for it.
And if you have the chance, if your family is a larger family and you've got grandparents by any chance around, what a great source of entertainment for kids more often than not. Because the grandparents don't have the responsibility for the child usually, so they can be much more relaxed with the child than you would be as a parent. And grandparents have great stories more often than not. They can tell you things. And the kids benefit from that. It's all about stories and kind of keeping the kid connected to something else besides just the TV.
It is, and I think it's really important for kids to go to nursing homes, or the ones that have more alive, because it's hard for children to see people that are incapacitated and hurting. I would say take them to a place where there's a community. There's a lot of senior communities where people are active, and it's more of a senior environment where they're walking and talking, and they're playing the piano. It's important for kids to be around elderly people, for not just the respect aspect, but there is, like you said, the storytelling. Storytelling is very, very important. However, I want to also address one more thing. It is also very important that kids, I'm not saying throw death in their face. However, you can't hide death from children either. You have to, if a pet dies, you might create a little ceremony. However they feel, let them work it out and work through them with it. And so, again, I don't encourage people to take people to a nursing home. People are very, very sick because it is scary to children. Mm-hmm. However, you do need to expose children to natural death processes if it does happen in your family. You can't just be, completely oblivious to it and not let kids know that things do happen. It's just you have to do it in a way. I wouldn't just throw them into the situation. So, and again, there's lots of resources about that as well. And that's what I love about the world that we're in. There really is this amazing global collaboration of education out there.
But again, be critical, because not all the resources are good. There's a lot of crap out there too. So you've got to be careful. There's a lot of stupid theories that just don't work. Be critical. If it doesn't smell good, it probably isn't that good for you. So think about it before you just run into anything. But definitely, there are a million resources. Just be critical about the ones you choose.
Yeah, and that's why, again, for me, everything's about due diligence. We as, if, like, again, our food, go find your source. Education, go find your source. You have to do your homework. You just don't go blindly, go to the internet, pick out a page and go, I'm going to follow that philosophy. You have to do some research, and that may take a little time. And for me, life in general, I always do due diligence, even with friends, especially with the social media internet world that we have. I don't just friend somebody. I should go look at their page and get a sense of what they're posting.
I've had 3 FBI agents show up at my door just when she was doing a background check on me. So she's right. That's true.
So you have to, you as a parent have the responsibility, even for yourselves, when you're doing things. Go do a little bit of due diligence. It isn't that hard, and it isn't that time-consuming. Yes, it is a little time-consuming, but it's not overwhelmingly time-consuming to actually do a little due diligence and a little research.
And think about how much time it'll save you later on, too.
It does. It saves a lot of headaches if you do the due diligence. And that's for everything. And so there are, like I said, we encourage you to go seek out tools. If you do have any questions, please feel free to put a comment in the Vimeo section, and I'd be more than happy to answer you and give you some resources. I have a plethora of resources when it comes to kids because I designed the program for my center. I was certified by the state because I ran it as a preschool, not as a daycare. And I've studied psychology and theology, and for over 25 plus years. I myself did go through the pregnancies. Unfortunately, I cannot have any children. However, because I couldn't have any children after I went through quite a bit of trauma with all that, that is why I massively got involved in children, because since I couldn't have my own anymore, I was raising everybody else's children. And so I did a lot of education on all different modalities, from attachment parenting to conscious parenting to the Waldorf schools to the Montessori's to mainstream public schools. And so I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
All right, everyone. Well, the music means we are near the end of the show, so we appreciate you being there. Please give us your feedback. We like hearing your comments, good or bad. And we've been lucky. So far, they've been good. We haven't done anything yet terribly bad, but...
Except for you today, that one comment.
That was actually a very accurate comment. But anyway, actually, I have friends who develop software for HMOs. There are fields in the HMO that says denied care, and you get points for that. Think about it. Bad stuff. That's really unethical. My dad died from an HMO who did nothing for him. So, until it was too late.
That's a whole nother show.
That's a whole nother show.
Insurances and
yep.
Oh, God.
Yep. But anyway, you guys have a great one, and we will see you next week on Transformations with Carly and Rick. Have a good one. Take care. Thanks, Carly.
Bye.